What's up? Welcome back. This is your host, Siris King. And this episode, I'm going to talk about spiritual evolution. But I'm going to kind of combine it with physical evolution and kind of show you how, in some ways, we've been missing our marks on many different things because when it comes to evolution, so let's say let's look at it from the spiritual standpoint, right? And it's from the spiritual standpoint, we tend to argue about which spiritual system is best, right? Then you got some people who don't even believe in anything. They don't even believe in anything spiritual. So then you might be some people who might be like, well, I'm more of a scientist. They're more of a scientist. Then you got others who might not argue about spiritual systems, but they would kind of go into personality. So, some people would be like, well, I'm down with Buddha. Other people would be like, I'm down with Christ. And it's very difficult because a large part of the problem is, and I've told you this before on I think the video talking about the astral politics. The inner world and outer world, the inner world being astral or the spiritual world, and the outer world being the physical world, the world of matter. It's a very interesting dynamic between the two because in some ways, I feel what happens is like when I was breaking down the inner world to you, and I said, when things that are the inner world is often the opposite of what we experience in the physical, and that's what makes it difficult to kind of gauge because it's the opposite. So, problem is, though it's the opposite, the physical world is trying to copy the inner world. So, some masters have learned that when you actually discover inner truths, those inner truths still hold true to the external world, but it's hidden. So meaning the external world is trying to copy it. So it's hidden in the sense that Maya or illusion is wrapped in that inner truth, and you can almost overlook the inner truth and go on a detour. And that's what happens in the physical world. So one of the biggest truths, and this is why I think science has to be involved. We can't talk about spirituality for science. And I don't remember which video it was. I remember it was a video where I was talking about evolution. Kind of, only mentioned evolution. And the person was like, I don't believe it. You believe in Darwinism? I don't believe in evolution. And they went into this stardust or some kind of theory about we came from, either they said the stars or we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And this is my problem with New Age thought. With New Age thought, what has been the greatest conflict between religion and science? Science can look at religion and they can tell. Like religion tries to say that they have spiritual truths from this intelligence that they call God, right? And a scientist can look at that and say, well, okay. And because not only do they say they have the truth from God, they usually say God sent them their religion. And the problem comes in with that theory is, if God sent you religion, I'm pretty sure God is not a Homo sapien. I'm pretty sure God is beyond human. And yeah, when I say it, people will think I'm being facetious. They will think, of course, God is beyond human. No, because when you look at religions, you see humanity all over religions. When you look at religions, you see the human construct in almost every single religion. The only religions you don't see the human construct like that is like things like alchemy, shamanism, the old school religions, not even religions, old school spiritual systems, because they're not really religion. When they say stuff like, in alchemy, you say stuff like, the closest thing to God is minerals and metals. After that, distant third is plants, right? Then you say in shamanism, the rocks or the minerals, the animals, the plants are our teachers, and we're supposed to care for them. And they have more wisdom than us. That's just an indigenous way of looking at we're supposed to be one of our ecosystem. That's all that's telling you. Now, when you hear those schools of thought, that's a far cry than what we get today, right? So, under the shamanistic system, under the alchemy system, like even in alchemy, if you look at Hermeticism as just the philosophy of alchemy, they literally say evolution. You start as minerals, then we evolve to plants, then we evolve to animals, then we evolve to humans, then humans evolve to spiritual humans, which some people classify as angels. And Hermeticism and alchemy did not say evolution doesn't exist. They're literally saying we started a rock, then we go to plant, then we go to animal, then we go to human, then we go to spiritual human, right? Pretty standard. Now, yeah, if you look at my video on the fourth dimension, right? Sometimes when people access, because the inner world, no, the fourth dimension is basically the inner world. It's the fifth dimension too, right? And sure, you get systems, because you get an argument, you get this argument where some people will say, well, in some systems, they never said that we were a monkey, they were a human being, right? They just say we're a human being. And in other systems, like in Hinduism, they was like, oh yeah, you could be an animal, you could be human, then you could go back to the animal. And people have disagreements on this. And realistically, people are not really looking at it carefully. In a lot of systems that don't talk about us being animals, it's because it's pretty clear. Mineral to rock. I'm sorry, rock is mineral. So rock or mineral to plant to animal to human, right? We don't go back. So once you get to human, you're going to keep incarnating human. And then you could try to jump to spiritual human, which is what people call angels or whatever people want to call that, right? I don't want to get into spiritual human. I'm trying to keep it more scientific as much as I can. So that's, if you look at it from that point of view, then you're not going to have a record of you being a human and go back to a monkey or an animal. No. Once you cross that threshold, you go to the next one. So that's no real difference than for most systems. Yeah, like you might have a system that says we go back and forth, but that's a minor disagreement. And when we have such a problem with the evolutionary part of us, this is it. We're not really in tune with our ecosystem, because there's people who, like for instance, people like to talk about us come from monkeys, where we don't really say we come from monkeys. We have the same ancestors, right? We're primates. That's what started. I know I mentioned that, and somebody went in the evolutionary rant, right? We're primates, and we have the same ancestor, right? I'm like, dude, if you can't handle that, we come from like primate, just one part of evolution. I mean, we were fish. We were like worm-type like creatures. We were small little red protists. We kept going small. We were like, before even that, we were a simple cell organism. Like, we've always been evolving. That's not going to change. So when we have issues with these things, and this is like nonsense to have issues with, because what ends up happening, here's a bigger problem. This is where the science comes in. Science, but 15 years ago, I mean, maybe longer, but this is when it got famous. But I wouldn't even say not even 15 years ago, but maybe the mid-90s. It's about 25 years ago. They started to see that there's not enough genetic variation of different races for them to really classify race. Like they used to have 3 races, then they went to 6 races. But when they look at it, chimpanzees have more genetic difference between them than humans do. You could take the humans on complete opposite ends, which would be like not even what people think white and black. The humans on opposite ends would be like the black sub-Saharan African and the Aboriginal in Australia, even though they both look black, right? A wide variance of difference genetically, right? And there's not enough of that for them to really say race is real. Now, they can say race is real socially. Now, here's the difference. Yes, obviously race is real socially. Anyone telling you race is not real socially is a crazy person. Yes, obviously that is. But this holds true spiritually now. Because when you do evolution, spiritual evolution, and you go by groups, right? So meaning, this is the problem. Every single species would have what you would call their leaders. And I could be talking about animal species, right? So I could go to plants. And angiosperms, right? Which are flowering plants, grass. They came into existence. I mean, they became the dominant plants about 100 million years ago. For evolutionary standards, pretty recent. I'm saying 100, maybe like 70 million. I wish they came in when the dinosaurs died. So between 50 and 75 million years, I think, right? They became dominant. And ferns and mosses were much more dominant. And they're still here, but the dominant plant species is definitely angiosperms, right? So much so that in the tarot, you see strength card, you see like roses, right? Like you see flowerings, right? I mean, you see a lion, of course, but you see angiosperms on a flowering plant on the tarot card, basically telling you, just when they have the lion, they say a lion is the king of the jungle. So when you see a lion, it represents all animals. When you see a flowering plant, it represents all plants. They're the royalty of the plant kingdom. So every kingdom has their own leaders, and kingdoms is specific, right? A lot of genetic differences. So like when you get an amphibian, when you get a reptile, when you get a mammal, they're different. So basically, so think of it like an amphibian messiah, or even better, a reptile messiah will be a different messiah than a human messiah, right? Or mammal messiah, because they're very different. So the more different, when you get them different enough that you become your own kind of kingdom, you get your own leader, your own messiah, if you want to call it that. And messiah is a bad word, but you get your own. I guess messiah, like you get your own leader, right? So human beings are a type of mammal, and chimpanzees have more genetic difference between them. So unfortunately, what's happened for human beings is we're all kind of one species, but genetically, right? Let's be honest, spiritually too, but we deviated from that because of circumstance. And when we deviated from it, we evolved differently. When we evolved differently, here's a problem. Now let's take it to humanity. For this end, because people can only see past each other. They really can't see past themselves. So if we all started in Africa and then we went to different continents, right? So let's say I go all the way to Russia. And this is how they say in the Quran, it actually says Allah sends warners to all people. Warners are like prophets, right? He sends prophets to all people. So if we leave Africa, and some people go to Europe, some people go to Asia, some people go to Australia, etc., etc., etc. If we all were in Russia, and they get a warner or a prophet, right? Even though that prophet only touched Russians, what the prophet was symbolic of gets imprinted in all of humanity, because all of humanity is the same soul group or the same kingdom. I don't want to even say soul group, but they're the same kingdom, like meaning there's only one race. But we don't treat ourselves like that, so then we even chop up our spiritual masters. You got this, you got this, you got this. So in Islam, they would always say, now they read talk about the prophets of Abraham, but they'll say you're never supposed to compare prophets. I can see where they got that from, because the problem comes in is that when you deal with a prophet, a guru, an avatar, let's say an avatar, right? I should have said avatar for reptile and whatever. Plants, and avatar is a better word. When you do avatar, every avatar is symbolic of something. And that's what people don't really, and not when I say symbolic of something, symbolic, that's almost like our evolution. So if Buddha came in and taught us compassion and simplicity, where he made the Hindu scriptures more simple. Instead of having arguments, debates like we used to have, he made it simpler. And then he taught compassion. He was symbolic of something from the above world that's being imprinted throughout all the humans. It wouldn't even matter if the human is in Australia and never saw him. Like, it wouldn't even matter if the human is in Australia and never saw him. That become imprinted on all the humans with one group. Now, every prophet has their own strengths. Like Muhammad came in and he symbolized submission. Totally submitting to the higher forces. That gets imprinted through the whole human. Like, if they're a prophet or an avatar, I mean, it could be a prophet, it could be especially human born, and a prophet is one that makes himself into that. But they're both symbolic of the same thing. They represent something that's being imprinted throughout all humans. So if I'm in Peru and I've seen these things, it doesn't matter. They'll still be imprinted. What happens is when we're evolving and all these codes from the above world being imprinted on us, we're not aware of it because we were disconnected from each other. So some people in Peru, some people in Australia, some people in Russia. So the European race brought the world together. Hate it or love it, brought the world together. Could be through war, could be through slavery, could be through opium wars and genocide. Technology-wise, the world is now together. And what this does, it then gives us the ability to bring what everybody has to the table and put it together. Because what's happened is, it's almost like our reality in the inner world has differed so much from our reality in the outer world. You can't even. It's now we all suffer from it, because let's say if I'm into Buddha, and Buddha was symbolic of something, right? And I didn't get that. Like, meaning I didn't see. I wasn't in Asia. I don't have internet. Then what he represents being imprinted in me and all of us, we're not consciously aware of it. Because no matter when something's imprinted in you, eventually you need a master, or whatever you would call it, a guru, or an adept, whatever, an initiate, to make it aware. Because we're living in this world for our conscious mind. So it made sense when the early Muslims used to say, you don't compare the prophets. Because what ends up happening, for instance, Christians, they're so focused on Christ. Most Christians talk about Christ and don't even know the Old Testament. And the Old Testament was symbolic of so many things being imprinted in us that had to happen before we get to the Christ stage. And this happens with spiritual leaders. Spiritual leaders. This also happens with empires, right? So, because it's not just the spiritual leaders, it's empires. A lot of empires mean things too, through all of us. So, perfect example would be in Egypt, right? Egypt's on the African continent, and because of racism and other types of bias, people would try to disassociate it from the African continent, especially the spirituality. Like, I'm not even getting into pyramids. I'm not even getting into all that, to be honest. Because we talk about spiritual evolution, right? Oh, but it's actually better. Actually, that doesn't actually that actually works my example I'm going to use. So people will say, well, I only see no pyramids in no other part of Africa except Egypt, even though Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt does. But that's a whole other story, right? I don't see no pyramids. I only see pyramids in Egypt, and there's nothing in Africa like Egypt. What they don't realize is, forget about the pyramids. We talk about spiritual evolution. The Egyptian religion was just symbolic of, not even symbolic, was accumulation of all the systems in the continent. And then the Egyptians, I don't even want to say perfected it, but they wrote it down in such a way, because before we didn't write stuff down. Like in Africa, they didn't really write stuff down like that. So a lot of things are going on in Egypt, and it represent, let's just say for now, a perfection. I don't want to get into it, but let's just say for now, not even perfection, the evolution of that spiritual science, and for the whole continent, from the south, from the west, from the east. I mean, I don't know how could you argue that, especially from the east, because Nubia came before Egypt, right? So it was accumulation of all those different ATRs as one, and then they were more connected to the Middle East. They were more connected to Europe, so they had other influences. And when you put it together, it was an evolution of it. But the way it goes, when people say, why can't we match the spiritual knowledge of the pharaohs? Because we disrespect the continent the pharaohs came from. Because basically, what we're looking at in the north of Africa was just a combination of what was in the east, west, and south, perfected. And when you miss that, it's the same thing as when you say, well, this prophet Job is better than Abraham, right? Or Abraham is better than Zoroaster. I'm just giving examples. There is no difference. Every spiritual master represented something. Every big empire, the big ones, represented something. Egypt represented something. Sumer represented something. The Olmecs in Mexico represented something. The Mayans, which is the extension of Olmec, represented something. Incas in Peru represented something. They represent, because the problem comes in. It's sort of like, think of it like you're a twin, right? You separate, you put on different continents. You have different experiences. But spiritually, you're connected to each other so much that when you have the experience, so if one twin is in India, one twin is in Hawaii, and they have different experiences, they're twins, they're both connected. So it's almost like saying the twin in Hawaii is getting a test, and the twin in let's say India has to know what the twin in Hawaii is doing based on a test, because they connect each other, because they're considered one. And we miss that. And the problem comes in is because, like I said, the way we evolved in the 3D, it allowed us to think that we're so much different than each other that now we start comparing our masters, master against master. We start comparing empire against empire, and everything gets lost in the shuffle. And this is tied into a much greater problem, because when you deal with empires, there's always been a lot of discussion. Like most people tend to focus on Atlantis. Let's say you believe in Atlantis, right? Let's just say for now, because I like to look at it as not even if these things existed, but they're still symbolic of stuff. So even if you feel so, like let's take a Lemuria and Atlantis, right? Even if you feel those two empires don't exist, there's no physical proof of it. They both represent two distinct things that tie into us now. They represent, the Lemuria kind of represented when we were all one, totally one with our environment. So much one that we probably could not make a distinction like we do now. So it's like, think of it like your hand, right? Your hand is part of your body. Your hand is so much part of your body, it can't even stop. You just said right now, I'm going to chop my hand off. Your right hand cannot stop you, right? And so when that happens, you can't really, you don't really understand individuality. You don't even understand love the way you're supposed to, because love, and you may say, why? You won. Yes, but here's the difference. Here's what comes in. You may not understand love. A Lemurian would understand love the same way an Atlantean would, because a Lemurian has to love you. So when you go now when you look at the next stage, Atlantis, again, this is not even here nor there if you believe these exist. Just look at it as our evolution, right? The Atlantean stage, we understand one now. We have the ability to pull out. We have the ability to say, I'm gonna detach from the hive. But because we're in an unfallen state, when we detach from the hive, we understand that we're still part of the hive. We're still part of the oneness. We just detaching from it to understand it individually, right? So, like, meaning your hand is different than your foot. Your hand is different than your eye. So you have to, like, there's an eye doctor. There's a hand doctor, because they're specialists, right? So when you detach yourself and then go back into the hive. So an Atlantean had the ability to detach themselves and then put themselves back together, right? They would achieve, in theory, a much better understanding than the Lemurian, but the Atlantean also they had a much higher level of chaos, because when they detached themselves in the physical, and when you understand astrology, because all what we call the fall of man is actually written in astrology. The sign related to Capricorn is actually telling this. The sign related to Capricorn explains this. Once we get to the Atlantean stage and we detach, attach it back. Detach, connect to the hive. We keep doing that for years. Eventually, when we detach, there's some of us who like being detached. Or when we detach, there's some of us who chaos overflows them when they detach. And then, because they're still part of a hive, it messes up the whole. And the whole group falls. So then when you finish with that stage, and we go to the stage of the pyramid empires rising in Sumer and in Egypt and Nubia, which is Sudan, and the Olmecs and Mayans in Mexico, now they have less awareness of being one than the Atlanteans, but they still have a much higher understanding than we have now. So they had the ability to. That where Atlantean could detach and attach, they could put themselves together, put themselves apart, put themselves together, put themselves apart. The younger empires, like, Egypt, Nubia, Olmecs, etc., the Mayans, they're born fallen, or they're born detached, but they have the knowledge and they decode it enough. Their spiritual systems explain this, and they're able to attach themselves back again, but only the priest caste can do it now. Like now, the regular humans, they have to look, man, they have to eat, they have to farm. They don't have time for this. The only person who's going to get this is the spiritual caste. So then the younger pyramid empires, for the first time, this is where the caste system starts to begin. This is when classism begins, where the spiritual priests in Sumer, in Egypt, in Mexico, they were able to still get it. But now the everyday people couldn't get it, which is a lot different than what people think Atlantis was like, what people think Lemuria was like, what people think the older Mu was like, right? And then there's empires before that, where they didn't have those problems. Everyone was connected. Even Atlantis, if you disconnect, you could connect again. You could almost do that at will. Now, everyone is disconnected, and they have to fight, and only the priests know it. right? But the priests, even though the priests know it, it takes the priests years. They don't do like the Atlanteans. The Atlanteans just like switch it off. They literally have a switch where they turn it off, turn it on. Now the priests take years, and then when they turn it on, right? When they turn it on, they're like 50, 60, 65 years old. Big difference. But then we keep falling even worse, right? And remember, Egypt is really coming from Nubia. That's how it goes. And Nubia's got the knowledge from the pygmies, where they used to call it the Baka in the central, and then the Bushman in the south. You put all those knowledge together, and then they get that, right. So now it's devolving even more. So now once the permanent empires fall, now we got, let's say, the masters in the East, the yogis. They hold together what the Indus Valley Empire had, right? They hold that together. But now it's even worse, because now the knowledge is, we're no longer permanent empires. So now the knowledge itself is being fragmented even more. So now when we get the spiritual truths, and we're all over the place, because remind you, we're really one group. So when this is all taking place, and so now you see the chaos, because we're one group, and we keep going to further and further parts of the globe. And as they say in the Quran, Allah sends a warner to every single people. So when the Aborigines get somebody, we don't know who that is, right? And that's something that warner is coming down and imprinting things. Even if you're in Peru, even if you're in Compton, even if you're in the UK, there's spiritual truths being imprinted in you that you're not consciously aware of. And so what that does is it causes chaos. So then we have to design it where you could bring the world together. Because when the world comes together, spiritual systems will come together. And people may not like Aleister Crowley, but he represented something too. And when he says, "Oh, I seen it," all the spiritual systems will fade. It's gonna be one system. Yeah, because that's how it was in the beginning. And the only way that will be one system is when the world comes together. So when non-spiritual seekers obsess about the New World Order or one world government, yes, there's going to be people who understand the path that we're taking, and they can try to do it for their own corrupt needs. Of course. But then there's other people who understand that this is all part of a design. Because as long as we stay separated, if they send some Quetzalcoatl's in freaking Mexico, and he's kicking some stuff to the Mayans and Aztecs, and we don't get it, that stuff is still being imprinted in us spiritually. But we're not consciously aware of it. And even if we have a guru, the guru's from our culture, he can't match it. And that's what has went on. And so that's why, whether it's Buddha, whether it's Zoroaster, whether it's empires that, because when we were on a more shamanistic stage, in shamanism, you don't really do the guru stuff as much, right? So that's why then it still holds true. Like, so for instance, it still holds true that even if you got some empires, or not even empires, some cultures that don't do the guru stuff as much, it happens because in shamanism you don't really do that when the culture is on the lunar stage, because you got the lunar stage and solar stage. Right? Think of solar as growth, right? But lunar gives birth. It gives birth to seeds, and then it grows. So when you're in the solar stage, which is more ascension based, but not even really, it's ascension, but it's more like evolving to spiritual human, right? We go mineral to plant to animal to human to spiritual human. Spiritual human is more solar. Once you go to that stage, the oneness that people see has to be experienced in such a way, and it goes beyond blood. But the crazy part of it is, though it goes beyond blood, you got to go to the moon stage first, right? That's why in the Tree of Life you got Yasad, which is the moon, which is the 9th Sefer, right above us, and then Taberif, which is the 6th, three steps above Yasad, because you go to the moon's the mom, and the mom goes to the sun, right? So from that angle, us allowing social realities or external realities to affect our spiritual growth or understanding more has now affected us so much that we can't even appreciate the fact that every culture has something to offer everyone because we're all one group. And I'm not saying it from a kumbaya standpoint. Like I said, if we talk about voting, if we talk about some social stuff, then we can stay separate. I don't mind that. Right? I'm not talking about some kumbaya stuff, but I'm talking about when it comes to this spiritual shit, right? Literally. Because sometimes I forget I'm on a podcast, I'm on YouTube, I could curse on YouTube. When it's about this spiritual shit, it's a different ballgame. And we miss that. And so when we compare prophets, when we compare systems, when we even compare certain cultures and say, this culture has more spiritual stuff than that culture, we don't really realize all that culture is all us. So if you got some Shintoism in Japan and they're kicking some stuff, that still represents something in us, but we unfortunately now, we're not getting that. That's the difference. And this doesn't mean you have to go to every single system, because we don't have the time to do all that. Because I would say that we do have majors and minors. Buddha was a major prophet. Christ was a major prophet, right? And again, this is not to worship their personality. Just look at more the symbolism of what they are. Where Buddha was like the Christ before him, before the Christ in the West, kind of taking Hinduism, Buddhism, and bringing the best out, right? Christ, if you go into the Gnostic version of Christ, not the stuff that's the mainstream understanding of it. What's Gnosticism? Gnosticism is esoteric Christianity. What's esoteric Christianity? Esoteric Christianity realized that esoteric Christianity has a lot of ties to Egypt. A lot of ties to Egypt, right? And they understand that they actually look at themselves as a continuation of the Egyptian spirituality, but a continuation for this time. Because where Gnosticism is almost like Egyptian spirituality, far more coded. You're not getting the word Isis anymore. You're going to get Holy Spirit. You're not getting Horus. You're not getting Christ. You're getting Horus. You're not getting the Father. You're going to call the Father Osiris. You can still end your prayers with Amen. Right? Instead of denial, you just say holy water. You're still getting it, but far more coded. Why is it far more coded? Because it's far more separation now. When it's far more separation, it's far more there's like a bigger lack of understanding. So when it goes from Gnosticism to Sufism, because it's far more darkness, far more chaos. Sufism, when they make jihad, not the way the terrorists do it, right? Make jihad on themselves, on their own ego. And they have to be disciplined to then achieve that state that they had in the past. When they had 108 in the Teru, and there's 99 names of Allah. The 99 names of Allah is really the 108 in the Teru. They're just missing 9. That's all that is. That's a whole nother level. But there's a saying to that. So then when you got people who we say we went from Kabbalah or Judaism, next level, Christianity, Gnosticism, next stage, Islam, Sufism, there's a whole bunch of people who can't get to Islam, Sufism because they have cultural biases now. Just like there's a whole bunch of people who there was masses after that. We start talking about Simon Togo in Central Africa, right? You start talking about Alistair Crowley in wherever, England, wherever. Like we start having other masters after that now that we even forget because now we have more cultural constraints that come in. And in Alistair Crowley's place, he went crazy. So I wouldn't tell anyone to follow him. Be honest. He went crazy, right? But that happens too. Just because you're a master, you get touched. You also you're in a physical body, and you can go crazy. And not even just crazy, but the chaos can affect you so much that you then lose touch to what you were supposed to do. But when that happens, your original purpose still gets imprinted. So it doesn't even matter if they go crazy sometimes. So all these are things that have to be studied. And we have to respect all masses from all lineages, period. Because in the end of the day, the Maya and the physical realities, like I said, we talk about some voting shit. We talk about some everyday life stuff. You can stay separate. I don't really care what you want to do. But when it comes to some spiritual stuff, it's a whole different ballgame. And sometimes we are so separate that we like to hide it, and like, so we have a lot of fake unity, right? So it'll be like so like a New Age person would say, yes, I believe everybody's one. But you ever notice in New Age system, there's like a slight, not even slight, like how would I say it? it's probably like a bias towards Africa, right? So they'll talk about Asia, they'll talk about Native Americans. You're lucky they talk about Egypt. That's it. Egypt's as far Africa as you can go. That type of bias. But they will stay. But when you look at them, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we all won. Yeah. We all won. Get over race." That's not what I'm talking about. We have to study how we became different, why we became different, to put it back together. That's why I mentioned the Atlanteans, because in Lemuria and Mu, we more one. We couldn't even understand no differences. Atlantis, we had the ability to pull ourselves apart, and then come back together. But when we pull ourselves apart, we can understand, oh, my eye, my hand, my foot, right? Maybe before that, they couldn't understand that. That's the difference. Then when we go to the pyramid empires, only the best of us can do that. So then, because only the best of us can do that, and the pyramid empires, which is like, Samaria and Egypt and the Mayans, they had to now make up other systems for their brothers and sisters who were so lost, they would never get that in one lifetime. Stuff like that is how Kabbalah becomes Judaism, how Gnosticism becomes Christianity, how Sufism becomes Islam. Because now, outside the pyramid empires, now you got to make systems for the everyday person who's just totally lost. That person ain't going to get it. And the key is not really about chastising them, understanding or slowly starting to understand how we got to this point of total chaos and darkness. And that's the only way we're going to get ourselves out of it. Siris King. Till next time. Peace.